Hey everybody, welcome back to Ravenstead. It's time for another build. We've got an idea for a tall, rocky spire. I've got my base section and a couple of bigger chunks of foam that we'll glue up. And then on top, I think we'll have either an obelisk or some kind of a magical portal, or maybe an altar. We'll see what comes up as we build. So why don't you watch over my shoulder and let's get something built.
Alright, let's get into it. Just want to mark out where I want this top layer of the spire, and then I'm going to glue this down with a little hot glue. I'm also going to run some deck screws up into the foam. Got a couple different screws. That's a 3.5, a little too long in case I want to trim the top, so I'll go with a 3-inch screw and just drive that right in. Gives the piece some weight too. A little countersink, make sure it sits flush. And I'll mark out where I want the whole spire on the base piece. And we'll glue that one down as well. And then we'll run a screw into that one too. And that one I went with a really long screw. Way up in there. There we go. That gives us some nice weight too. I use a craft knife here. I don't cut myself, so don't worry about that. It's always a challenge to try and get an organic shape to the scatter terrain, especially when you're starting out with a big rectangle. So I'll get some nice smooth lines here, some curves. Just gonna whittle this down. Break pieces off too. That gives a pretty cool texture on the foam. Very stone-like. Just taking off all these sharp corners, kind of blending everything in. And just slice that right off. Try and cut down on the flat surfaces. Just keep working at it till I get the shape that I want. Then I'll texture it with a little bit of aluminum foil, balled up. Gives it a nice rocky texture. You got a lot of horizontal lines when you're building a piece up with several pieces of foam like this, so I'm kind of just cutting in some diagonal lines to break it up a little bit visually. Then I'll go in with a brass brush here and texture the edges. That'll give us a nice striated look to the stone. Go in a couple different directions. It kind of gives you little breakouts and whatnot. Put in a couple of boulders here. So I was kind of thinking how someone would get to the top of this spire. I thought about doing a ladder. I thought that was a little overdone. I decided to go with a couple of platforms and some of these big boulders to kind of get up there. I decided to go with an obelisk on the top. So I want to add a little mystery here and how on earth they got something so big and so heavy up there. Question for the ages, right? So this is a little bit of foam that I textured with that brass brush. It gives it a cool wood look. So I got these timbers going in. I didn't really get too fancy with the joinery on these. I just wanted it to look kind of cobbled together. Like someone looked at the spire and said, how on earth can I get up there? And then they just built this thing. There we go. Get these timbers together. I try to think ahead a little bit this time in my painting. When I paint it with the black paint and Mod Podge all over, this would have been a really hard spot to get into. So I'm getting a little smarter, or at least a little more clever. And we'll pre-paint these areas that'll be covered up with planking. Really scrubbing that stuff in there too. It's nice and thick, kind of fills gaps. So it's good. And we'll lay in the planks on these platforms here. I just hot gluing those down. Got those hot glue strings everywhere. So at some point before I paint the whole thing, take a little time with a pair of tweezers and pick all those little strings off of there. I decided that top, that was a little bit of a jump there, so just kind of carve in, and it gives it a little bit more interest. Now here's the obelisk, and I textured that up, drew a couple little runes on it, and I'll just hot glue that on top. Got glue squishing out around the bottom, so we'll use flocking and clump foliage to kind of cover that up later on. So let's go ahead and black bomb this thing, get a good coat of Mod Podge and black paint. That's just mixed 50-50. I'll scrub that onto the whole piece, and really pushing a lot of it into those horizontal joints, as I want to kind of fill them up. Get that all finished up, and then we'll do some dry brushing. So first, I'm going to take care of all the wood. That's just a regular brown craft paint. I'm just scrubbing that on. And then once I get the tone that I want, I'll go over it with a lighter brown and highlight all the edges. And that really brings out the grain. And you don't want to use too much though. Keep those shadows. Those shadows are really important. Really gives it depth. A lot of character. I bet that thing is super rickety too. It probably wobbles when you jump up on it. This is some light gray craft paint, and just dry brushing that on the stone surfaces. This will bring out all the cool details of the stonework. Again, being careful not to overpaint, as you want to keep those dark shadows. And I'll eventually be using this on the wood as well to kind of highlight it, so I'm not too worried about hitting the wood. There we go. See, it just comes right in. Gives it that kind of sun-bleached, weathered oak look to it. And now we're going to use a really bright highlight. This is the color of this paint is called parchment. It's just like a beige, light beige. And I'm just hitting the edges of everything. And the brush is super dry, so I scrub most of the paint off on the paper towel, and then, oh, that's cool. You can kind of see the runes just appear right there at the top of the obelisk. This makes a huge difference. So here I just want to kind of keep in mind where the light is coming from, and then highlight those areas. That's something I'm trying to pay attention more in my painting, is light source. I've got a lot of lights around me when I'm filming this, so it's you gotta kind of just think of direction. A little brown wash over all the stone, over everything really. This is burnt umber acrylic ink mixed with water, about 50-50. And this will kind of mute down those stark gray colors, and it'll start pulling everything together. All the washes that I do a wet on wet technique, so I don't let it dry in between. So they kind of mix a little bit, so I keep that in mind when I'm choosing the values. Here's a little Vallejo wash. Looks like I'm going for a bloodbath kind of thing here, but I'm not. It's going to mute down. It just gives that stone that iron oxide look, kind of a granite look. And then some green wash. Kind of carrying a theme of the wooded, rocky lands. A couple of my other pieces have a lot of moss and trees, so I just want to carry that theme into this piece as well. But that green wash just kind of gets really muted as it dries. I just brush on some PVA glue. It's time to put a little bit of flocking on this piece. Anywhere that I think grass is growing or moss, I'll put a little bit of that glue down, and then sprinkle on some fine flocking. There we go. You can be pretty liberal with this stuff, and then just knock off the excess when I've got it all coated up. And then it's like magic. Boom. Grass. There we go. And I'm going to add some more coarse turf to it to give it a little bit more texture. So I'm just putting in a really watered down mixture of PVA glue and this coarser flocking. Just kind of tap it in. It's a little delicate at first until the glue dries, but it gets pretty stiff. It'll stick right in there. There we go. Alright, shrub time. Let's get some weeds and some shrubs growing around things. Again, we're kind of hiding our happy little mistakes here. All those blobs of hot glue and weird joints in the foam, areas that I might have missed where you can see pink foam showing through. You know what? Just stick a bush in there. Just like that. Boom. I'll give the little fox that lives underneath that platform somewhere to hide behind. There, I found a little spot that was bare foam, so in goes a bush. We got to have our rotten plank, right? So just a little bit of PVA glue here and there, and sprinkle on some flocking. That gives that nice rotten, wet, mossy look. Oh yeah. So I live in Virginia, and pretty much any structure on the northern facing side has moss on it. When I was doing carpentry, that's pretty much what we did, was chase rot around houses. Alright, we're just about done. I thought the backside here needed a little bit of attention, so throw in a couple of little bushes there in the back, and now let's take a look. I'll spin it for you so you can get a closer look. There it is, the obelisk. I bet that thing catches lightning. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. It's been great reading, interacting with you guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks again.